Forced to work from home by your employer? Laid off or feeling depressed at home? Do you want to make money working from anywhere? We'll show you how to do it from your couch. It's time for another episode of the Work From Home Show. Coming to you from their homes in Austin, Texas and Tampa, Florida, here are your hosts, Adam and Naresh.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Work From Home Show. I'm Naresh, along with Adam Schrader, and we have a third person with us. He's a friend of ours, friend of mine. Been working with him for several years now. I've been following all of his great motivational sessions. He is a best-selling author of the book Guerrilla Millionaire, Unlock the Secrets of the Self-Made Millionaire, and also producer and director of the new film, When Thoughts Become Things. I've learned a good amount from him when it comes to personal power, self-help, self-improvement. We've helped produce his podcast. He's had several of them over the years. And he is the creator of Personal Power Mastery. That's been branded Personal Power Mastery. His name is Douglas Vermeeren. Doug, welcome to the Work From Home Show.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Excited to be here.
Yeah, well, let's start the discussion, Doug, by talking about fears in a crisis. 2020, really probably the next couple of years.
Yeah, that's it, right? That's the conversation now, right?
It's a conversation now because even if we get out of the public health pandemic, we're still in a major economic crisis globally. The U.S. is doing much better than the rest of the world, but the U.S. still has a ways to go. And I think personally that 2021 is going to be very rocky for the economy, and 2022, maybe the first few months of 2022 are going to be recovery, rebounding times as well. So do your fears in a crisis create more problems than the crisis itself?
Yeah, for sure, certainly. And I guess, you know what, just to kind of rewind a bit, it's interesting because I've got lots of friends actually on both sides of the equation with what's happening in COVID. Some that are unfortunately losing their businesses. It's devastating. Money's not coming in. Accounts receivable are all dried up. You know, they're running on credit if they can get it, right? But on the other end of the spectrum, I also see people who are doing bigger business than they've ever done before, and things are literally exploding for them, right? And so, you know, while we want to talk about fear, I think that could really be a big part of this conversation. Why are some people thriving and some people literally just barely hanging on, trying to survive? And I think fear actually is an interesting thing, because if you think of what fear really is, like the definition of fear actually can't exist without imagination. We must have imagination to be able to experience fear, because fear is an expression of things that we don't know, right? When we know something, we can face it head on. We can recognize it as a challenge or a benefit or a problem or a solution. We can call it for what it is when we have the facts, right? But when it's from imagination, well, we create stuff and we can't deal with it, right? So then it becomes paralyzing to us. And I think that this is maybe one of the first things that I think is important for any business owner to understand. Before there was a problem, what did we have? We had no problem. And after we have a problem, what are we going to have? We're going to have no problem. So as soon as we recognize that, you know, life is very cyclical, whether it's the COVID, whether it's the depression of the 1930s or the recession of 2008 or the housing crisis or any of these things, we've got to remember that these are just temporary setbacks, and that whatever we are encountering right now, very soon after it will be a period where there is no problem. And I kind of also love what, you know, not only Warren Buffett, but many others have pointed out, that quite frankly, most of the Fortune 500 companies today that we know were started in a recession. Most of the wealth, the immense wealth, the big wealth was created in a recession. And so I think one of the biggest things that we need to do to sort of beat that fear is understand that we have the power to pivot. We have the power to reinvent ourselves. And more importantly, to reinvent ourselves in a time where people are a little bit less hard on each other. They're more forgiving because we're all going through this together. So I think that one of the big things that we need to understand is that now is not a time to get paralyzed. It's a time to be proactive. And if we can really recognize that, then we can tap into a power that, quite frankly, I think is one of the great opportunities that we have in this generation. I know that's a weird way to paint a negative situation, but we're really sitting in a positive, strong opportunity if we know what to do with it.
One of the things you've talked about is gratitude and how it's one of the most powerful forces in the universe. How can people experience and express gratitude when everything's shut down, they've lost their job, maybe their business is suffering? How do you express gratitude and find that inside of your life right now?
Well, that's an awesome question. And it's funny, when we did our movie, The Gratitude Experiment, this question came out a lot because this was just after, remember, all the damage and property damage in New Orleans and stuff. That had just happened. There were also tornadoes in Oklahoma at the time. And so, the media was asking me the same question. What do you mean gratitude? Like somebody just lost their house or worse? And the truth is we need to recognize the difference between gratitude for and gratitude in. Gratitude for is basically putting let's call it a gratitude label on all the things we have. I've got a nice bank account, got a nice family, got a nice house, got nice cars, drive nice, vehicles, whatever. But the truth is the most powerful gratitude is gratitude in, which is independent of everything that's going on around us. Like, what are we grateful for that isn't connected to those activities, right? So how do we find the great gratefulness within ourselves? Now, obviously, we can look at this from a religious point of view and say, I'm grateful for, the great creator and God and these things. But I think even then we can start more simple than that. Even if we don't get into the religious discussion, it's being grateful again for your capacity and power to take action, your ability to make new choices. And if we can start recognizing that we have choices, especially in moments of adversity and difficulty, then our power begins to return. The more we can see the possibilities, the more possibilities we can create. And it's interesting because right now we're talking about a lot of the new agey kind of ideas. And maybe there's some of your listeners that are saying, oh, I work from home. Give me some practical stuff that I can do. And I think that this is really, one of my fortes. You guys mentioned the book Guerrilla Millionaire. One of the other things I'm really well known for is helping people build passive income structures around their current businesses. And I think this is something that gratitude also helps us discover, is what really can we build as a system, right? What can we really build in terms of either delegating or automated? How can we use the things that are available to us to help solidify our business structures? And the more that we really understand the transactions that we're trying to create, like really, why are people paying us and what are we really giving them? When we understand that equation, we can really begin to understand how we can bring others, like systems in place and individuals to help us and automation to help us. And I mean, I'm grateful that we live in the greatest time of the history of the world. Like never before have we had so many resources and individuals available to help us to build our wealth. And I think that's a really important part that we often don't talk about when it comes to gratitude.
Now you have 5 pillars. There's self, spirituality, health, relationships, and abundance. Can you kind of talk about how those can help you in the personal power mastery?
Yeah, well, here's, I guess, maybe a cool beginning is how did I even come up with those? Well, what's funny is most people don't know this, but I went out and I interviewed more than 400 of the world's top achievers, very much like what Napoleon Hill did, right? Think and Grow Rich. I went out and I interviewed everybody from Richard Branson to Mark Cuban to Oprah Winfrey to, Donald Trump to you name it, right? And so here's the deal. Is I was sitting in the house of Bill Farley, who's the former president and CEO of Fruit of the Loom Underwear, used to own Christian Dior, Jordan Jeans, Gitano Sportswear, California Citrus. Like he's a big multi-billionaire business leader. And as I was interviewing him, I realized that I actually didn't have a definition of success. Like I wanted to ask him, what do you think is successful? Like what does success mean to you? And I didn't have a definition. And so as I began to reflect on all my interviews with everybody and thinking about what is it that people really want? Well, I found that it really fits into one of these 5 pillar areas, which again is self. So self-confidence, self-awareness, self-worthiness, self-fulfillment, right? These kind of things. Next, spirituality, again, not only connection to things of a religious nature, but being ethically connected to the community that we live in, like our beliefs and our values and the things that we find, to give us that spiritual fulfillment. Next, obviously, is our health. We all want to either, feel better about our health, be able to run faster, lose weight, quit smoking, look good, all these things. And then, of course, we've got our relationships and not just our families, but everybody we're connected to. And lastly, abundance. Now, the thing that's kind of interesting about all these is I think most of us are on a life mission to find balance among them. Some days we may have a lot of money, but our relationships suck. Some days we may feel good about our health, but we don't feel good about ourselves, right? So we're always trying to find a balance between these. But the other thing that's interesting is if you look, say, for example, at abundance, you have to complete the previous levels on those pillars before you can have abundance. So, for example, if you want abundance, it actually comes from relationships, right? Like all the money that you'll ever make comes through your associations with either your customers or those that are going to help you build business. So we have to understand that all those pillars are interconnected. And if we really want to create massive success in our life, we need to understand that it really does start with this connection to ourselves, right? We can never really build a massive net worth until we've understood our self-worth. And although some people say those are not connected, well, yeah, you can be broke and feel good about yourself, but you can never really be truly wealthy and feel broke about yourself. And I think that's really an important observation with those pillars.
Doug, right now, people or much of the world is thinking negative, and I've seen this myself where people are just so pessimistic or negative about, oh, we're all going to die from this virus, or the economy is going to shut down again, lockdowns are going to happen again, jobs are going to disappear, businesses are going to go down, or people who have already lost their jobs or their businesses, they're thinking negatively, I'm never going to get over this hurdle. Yeah. What key ideas or practices do people need to implement or know about in order to overcome this type of negative thinking?
Well, you know what's also kind of interesting about this is, as you know, we just put out our movie, How Thoughts Become Things. And so we've done a lot of studies on thoughts and how people think and how it affects our reality and so forth. One of the startling things that I discovered, and I didn't really realize this before, but when I figured it out, it was a big aha, is that actually all thoughts have a positive and a negative to them. Right? So it's not just, I got to think positive all the time to manifest this reality. The truth is that's not human, right? Like we can't just always think positively. There is going to be negative thinking that comes in. It's just the way that we're built. But let me maybe look at it this way with you. So let's say, for example, you've got one of your audience members who has this idea that says, I want to start a business. And they're very excited. They're enthusiastic. They see all the positive possibilities and they're really pumped. But right behind that will come the thought saying you're not good enough, you've never done this before, you don't have the support, you don't have the money, you don't have the knowledge, fill in the blank, right? And so if you imagine this thought with its duality, a positive and negative, what happens now is that will descend into your environment, right? And all the things that influence you. Kind of think of it almost like a nest, right? That's nurturing. If that nest is filled with people who say to you, listen, you've never built a business, our family doesn't do that kind of thing, you don't have the money, you're not good enough, etc., well, then that negative side is going to gain influence. However, if that surrounding again is positive and it says you can do it and you've got the support and we'll help you and everything, then the positive side will gain power. So I think one of the most important things we've got to remember is we've heard that quote oftentimes. It says you become like the 5 people you spend the most time with. Well, what's really interesting is that's actually attached to our programming. And let me explain. Most people think that our programming developed or evolved when we were a child, right? Like up until the ages of 3 or 5, depending on whose material you read, they say you had all your beliefs and values instilled. Well, to tell you the truth, that's false. We're actually building our values, building our expectations, if you will, building our beliefs every day. In fact, even the people that are listening to this podcast are being programmed right now to believe what's possible. And some of you will be saying, based on what he's saying, yes, I can. And some will be saying, no, I can't. So I'm not the only influence today in your life. It's going to be a combination of all the things that are there. But when a thought with its positive and negative arrives in your current programming, it's going to receive fuel. It's going to receive power, if you will. And so I think if we're looking at what's happening with COVID today and people saying, wow, it's, the crap's going to hit the fan one more time and it's going to be devastating. Well, I think you might be hanging around with the wrong people, because I've got people that I'm hanging around with who say this is the greatest time in the history of the world for a reset, for opportunities, for possibilities to build wealth, that there's people that need our services now. And in some cases, maybe what we've done is we've reset the way we offer those services, or even expanded or even changed some of the services we've offered, right? So I think the possibilities we always see will be a pattern of the peers that we hang around. So maybe here's a little saying, and we say this in Personal Power Mastery: what rules your life, your fears or your peers? And the truth of the matter is again, if you find the right peers, you actually rise to higher level. If you find the wrong ones, you're going to find the fears. So that's my feelings on that.
You're talking about finding the right people. How do you find that support and your network to build yourself up? Because there's a lot of people out there who are probably saying, "Oh man, I am hanging with the wrong crowd. My friends or my coworkers or the people I know are bringing me down some." How do you branch out and find the right network?
It's really cool. I think, because here's the thing is I get asked this question a lot. How did I get access to some of the world's top entrepreneurs, business leaders, celebrities, athletes, etc.? And I should mention that before I tell you how, not all of them were inspirations either, right? So I think the first thing that you need to recognize and understand is an awareness of who you want to be and what you value, so that when the right people show up, you can find that you'll resonate with certain people and certain you won't. But until you really know, it's kind of like that old saying that says, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything, right? So you've really got to understand, what do you want for a future? What do you want as a legacy? What do you believe about yourself? And then you're going to find that you're going to start attracting those people. Now, how did I get introduced to some of the biggest names that were out there? Kind of a funny story. I was meeting with a gentleman who was worth about $400 or $500 million at the time. He was meeting with me about once a week, helping me to think about my business, my life, my, everything I wanted to do. And I'll never forget that about 6 months into asking him questions and meeting with him every week, he said, "You know what, out of all the questions you've asked me, there's one question you haven't asked me that's going to change everything for you." And I said, "Well, what's that?" And he said, "Well, you haven't asked me who else I know that you should talk to." So when I asked him later, "Why did you think to tell me that?" He says, "Well, the truth is you were clear with your mission. When you know your mission, when your mission is specific and clear, it becomes attainable and near. And others can help you." So when I was clear with what I wanted and what I wanted to achieve, he could then offer other connections. He could offer other people to bring into my life so that I could have those questions answered. And funny enough, I had another mentor later on also mention this in terms of up-leveling your networks. He said, "You'll never do $1 million deal at a $10 breakfast," which I don't mean that as a criticism towards, inexpensive networking events. But what I mean is that you need to decide what you want, and then you need to go fishing in those networking events, if you will, right? You need to go to those places, right? You're not going to meet someone to do a big business deal with if you're going to really crappy events. So I think it's really important that we start taking very careful notice of who we're hanging out with, where we're hanging out with, and the message that we're conveying by, are we clear about what we want so people can help us, so that they can get involved. Now, here's just an interesting observation. All great and big things have always been created by a team, right? So if you want to build a big home business, I know home, we kind of immediately substitute that word for thinking that it means solo, meaning that we're by ourselves. I'll never forget, I had a meeting one time with a friend of mine. I was about 19, and I wanted to really start building a business. I'd never built a business before. And I sat down with him and I said, how will I find my customers? How will I do my marketing? How will I decide the demographic? How will I get distribution for my company's products and stuff? And I'll never forget, he stopped me and he said, "I can tell you're going to start a really small company." I said, "Well, what do you mean by that?" And he goes, "Well, it's because you're asking selfish questions." I said, well, explain. And he said, "Well, when you ask questions like, how can I, how should I, and everything's up to you, I, he says, you can only go so far." He says, the questions you should be asking isn't how can I find customers, but who has my customers? Who can help me find my customers? Who can do my marketing? Who can help me find my demographics? Who could reach them? Who could do the distribution? You see, the more that we look at giving those jobs away, the more we can expand. Because if we selfishly take everything upon ourselves, we're going to find very soon we have a limit. And so I think that's a really important principle in business, that we need to recognize that if that idea, that old saying that everybody says, if it's meant to be, it's up to me, it's a lie, right? Big business is never built by a single individual. And we need to be willing to get help, seek help, accept help, and recognize that we don't know everything.
Yeah, and going back to thinking, you do a lot of work on thoughts and thinking. And again, we have Doug Vermeeren on our show, creator of Personal Power Mastery and producer and director of the new film, When Thoughts Become Things. Regarding thoughts and things, how quickly can we make that mind shift and make that change to be permanent? Is it a 1 day thing, a 1 month thing? I'll tell you, me personally, I'll give you my strategy of what I did when I found myself in ruts, or if I wanted to learn something or implement something. I would become obsessed with it. I would subscribe to newsletters, read books, listen to podcasts every day. Anytime a new piece of information regarding a mind shift or a change came at me, I would just soak it in. And I'd say after about a year, let's just say 2 years, it just became a part of who I was, to the point that I didn't have to read as much about that topic anymore, because it just became a part of me. So again, going back to the original question, how quickly can thoughts be shifted and for the change to be permanent?
That's a great question. By the way, the title of the film is How Thoughts Become Things. So we've got a bit of a typo there, but how. And how is a really important word with the answer to this question. It's interesting. I wish I could give you a standard. Every thought that you ever want to change is going to take 36.9 hours to ingest into your life and become a habit. It just doesn't work that way. The reality is it doesn't, because different ideas and different things that come into your life are going to be fueled differently. There'll be unique emotional attachments to some things. There'll be some things that you're already doing, you're almost there, but one little aha makes a massive shift. There'll be some things, again, that, quite frankly, you've been learning for your whole life, and all of a sudden somebody shares a certain perspective on it, and you see it in an entirely new way, and you'll never see it that way again. So there's not really a big kind of formula, if you will, for how quickly your thoughts are going to change. But I will tell you this, that our thoughts, including our subconscious mind, bringing things out of our subconscious, it's almost like a dimmer switch, right? That there's not a black or a white. One day you get it, and the next day you don't, or whatever. It's all shades of gray, if you will. We understand things at a certain level. And if you think about things, let's just take it back to when we were kids in grade school. There were certain things that at that time we thought we really understood, right? But the more life experience we had with it, the more we gained a deeper understanding of it. Like, just even think of your relationships maybe with your best friend when you're in the first or second grade, right? You had certain feelings of connection to them and certain feelings of what it meant to be a best friend. And now that you've evolved in life, I see, I know Naresh, you're married, and Adam, I see a little cute baby in the picture that you put up here. So you're married. That's a different kind of friendship. You've evolved. You've risen to a level of kindness, connection, and love that, you kind of had that as a kid, but now you've really got it, right? So I think all the things that we learn come to us at different speeds depending on how important they are to us, right? And so we've just got to also give allowance that, I guess the challenge is when we look back, we say, oh man, had I only known, right? Like, had I known this kind of stuff when I was younger, I could have done so much better or been so much more or so much, etc. I think we just need to be gentle on ourselves and recognize that we wouldn't be who we are today had we not had those experiences back then. And so, we've got to be open to learning, but we've got to be gentle on ourselves to recognize that things aren't always going to be an instant click. And then sometimes when they are, well, there's still more to learn. So we don't have it all. Mastery, even that word mastery, it's not a matter of a level of proficiency. It's really a level of persistence. Are you willing to keep learning? I think that's really the important lesson there.
You just brought up the kid thing, and I wanted to go into that. How do we work on instilling this kind of mindset in our children during this time and in the future as well? How do we make sure that we can instill this in our kids as we pass it down?
Yeah, for sure. Well, the number one way is example, because obviously kids listen more to what we do rather than what we say. And, it's interesting. I recently got a letter from an 11-year-old boy who just saw our film, How Thoughts Become Things. And he was telling me how, he had a lot of fear. He was watching the adults in his life and the media and everything. They were all talking about to be afraid for COVID, because right now that's what we're all talking about. And there was really no conversation for kids. So through example, he learned it's time to be afraid. And he didn't even really understand why. But on a positive note, I've got a really cool story that happened to me that, again, by example, kids learn. So I was in Las Vegas, and my telephone rang, and it was my assistant, Rachel, and I picked it up, and she says, would you be okay to take a telephone call in about half an hour, 15 minutes? I said, sure. Yeah, no problem. So she booked it on my schedule, and all of a sudden my telephone rings, and I look down at my phone, and it's my son Jared calling. And I'm like, oh no, I got to get him off the phone right away because I got this business call coming in about 15 minutes or whatever it is, right? So I get him on the phone, and I say to my son, I go, hey, Jared, how you doing, buddy? I got to let you go because I got a call coming in, a business call. And he goes, it's me, Dad. And I'm like, what? Okay, now I'm really curious. He goes, yeah, it's me. And he then proceeded to explain that he had been in touch with one of my business partners who does land development real estate. And he said, I'd like to do an investment. I'm calling you, Dad, to ask for a loan. And this is my proposal on how to pay it back. And I'm buying this investment and stuff. And the more that I talked to him, the more it became apparent that he had observed me doing business deals like this with people. And he really just kind of understood that's the way that you do business. And so for me, it was a really big thing to understand that, again, our kids see by example exactly how we operate and run our lives. And if we're looking to have, success appear in the lives of our kids, I think it's also important that we trust them. And when they come with these ideas and opportunities, we give them the opportunity to try it, to experiment, and to explore, and to participate. And so I think that that's really, for me, what I've noticed that has worked really well working with my kids. And keeping in mind, I'm not perfect with my kids, but we certainly have fun, right?
Did you tell him that if he wanted to pitch you the business idea, he should have called you in 15 minutes when the call was actually scheduled?
Yeah, maybe, hey? But what's so funny is I've got 3 kids. And the other thing that's maybe an interesting kind of lesson with this, and I have 3 grandkids now too, is the more that I see these children in my life, the more I recognize they're all so different, right? And so even to answer that question that they all learn by example, they also need support in different ways, right? If I look at my 2 sons, one of them, like the one we just talked about, very entrepreneurial. In fact, yesterday, again, we were talking about another business idea that he's looking to build and sell. My other son, he's more the slow and steady. And so he needs the support, but he also needs kind of this structure to kind of see how things are going to work, right? Like, what they say about entrepreneurs. An entrepreneur is the guy who jumps off a building and builds an airplane on the way down, right? That's my first son. My second son, nope, he builds the airplane, makes sure the landing gear is checked out properly, and blah, 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 right? So you got to understand how each of them works. And then, of course, my daughter, she actually is from a heart-based point of view. So from her entrepreneurial journey, she actually looks more than even the profits and making the money. It's how can she make a difference in the lives of her customers. So you've got to recognize that each person kind of approaches things differently. So even though they learn from example, it's how are you going to nurture that now in a style that particular child will benefit from. And wow, that's a whole other podcast that we could talk about. And again, I'm not an expert on how to get your kids doing things, but I've been very proud of what mine have been able to achieve, and all of them are now beginning to build their own personal business success, which is very fun to see. Very exciting.
That's Douglas Vermeeren, creator of Personal Power Mastery, author of Guerrilla Millionaire, Unlock the Secrets of the Self-Made Millionaire, producer and director of the new film, How Thoughts Become Things. The websites are douglasvermeeren.com. That's douglasvermeeren.com. And the movie's website is How Thoughts Become Things movie.com. How Thoughts Become Things movie.com. Doug, how can people get this film? Is it available for purchase, or is it going to hit theater? Well, I guess
nobody's doing theaters now. Heck, we're even all disappointed about James Bond, right? But anyways, you can head over to howthoughtsbecomethings.com. You can either go to How Thoughts Become Things movie or howthoughtsbecomethings.com. We own them both. They both go to the same place. The cool thing is that film, actually, most people right now are calling it the follow-up to The Secret, the movie The Secret. It features most of the cast. So in the film, we've got Bob Proctor, John DeMartini, Joe Vitale, John Ostroff, Bob Doyle, Dennis Waitley, all the big names, Marie Diamond, they're all in there. And the cool thing right now is we've, because we're online, so this is kind of a neat thing, right? Pivot, right? We actually have included a workbook this time and some additional bonus supplemental material and audios to help people not just watch the movie, but to be able to implement it and to be able to get to the next level in whatever they're doing based on the combination of the materials. So we wanted people to have an experience, not just watch a movie. So it's a great time to get involved and go see it right now.
Great. That's howthoughtsbecomethings.com or howthougtsbecomethings movie.com. workfromhomeshow.com. Doug, any final thoughts you want to share with our listeners or anything else you want to promote?
Well, the first thing I want to promote is you, right? Like you as a listener. I think you got to understand that most of the gurus that are out there right now are telling you to get out of your comfort zone and go do amazing things and blah, blah, blah. And I think that that's kind of a tough gig. I'm going to suggest instead focus on your brilliance zone. What are you really good at? Don't worry about getting uncomfortable. Let's focus on the things you're really, really good at. And then this idea of taking massive action and waking up early and hustle and grind, I think that's bad advice for an entrepreneur. I don't want you to take massive action. I want you to get focused and take deliberate action. The object of the game is productivity, not busyness. And so recognize your brilliance and then have some real concrete ideas, some specific things that you can do that are going to multiply your efforts in today's marketplace. And certainly there's much more we can talk about that in the future. But I think one of the biggest things right now that most people are kind of, lacking or even hiding behind is they're using COVID as an excuse or as an escape route to say, well, I don't have to really perform high. I don't have to do my best because we're in a pandemic. The truth of the matter is everywhere you go, in every situation, you can create possibilities. And so don't wait for someone to give you permission to be brilliant. Go out there and do it. Seize the day and create something amazing. That's my advice.
Really, really good advice. Doug Vermeeren, thanks so much for coming on the Work From Home Show. To all our listeners out there, visit our website, workfromhomeshow.com. That's workfromhomeshow.com. If you have any questions for us, hello@workfromhomeshow.com. hello@workfromhomeshow.com. All of our previous episodes are on our website. Leave us a review on iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spotify, whatever podcasting platform you listen to us. And until next time, keep on working from home.